But what do you see as the role of after-school programs in Oakland?
Well, first of all, I realize that a lot of you were not around when the first Kids First was passed. I worked on that campaign, and I was the major author of D, which is your current funding source, the current first. So I've been a long-time defender of after-school programs. What you may not know is that when I worked, again, as a school board member, I chaired the Council of Urban Boards of Ed, which is the 100 largest school districts in the country, that time representing 1 of every 4 kids. And I worked really closely with the Urban Caucus in Congress to get the 21st Century Grants, which some of you are still getting the last dregs of, and that was the big Clinton initiative to increase the number of after-school programs for urban areas. Why? Because for a lot of our kids, we have a situation where it's really not that safe in the neighborhoods, and that parents tend to keep the kids at home. We also have a lot of kids in this city who are English is their second language, and we have a lot of kids whose families, either their families are working all the time, or that because of drugs or high rates of incarceration. In some neighborhoods, kids don't have as much family support as they need. So but we know that after-school programs give kids more attention, a safer place to be, extends their day. In some cases, if they start farther behind in schools, we know in schools where there's an extended day that kids catch up faster and more likely to get to grade level. And if you stay at grade level, you're more likely to stay in school. If you stay in school, you're more likely to graduate. And if you graduate, you're less likely to later end up in the California prison system. And why do I say that? Because California predicts how many prisons it needs on a long-range basis by how many kids read at grade level at 3rd grade. And that we have this massive situation going on now in the state, which is very similar to the city, where the prisons now are taking up so much of the state budget. Jerry Brown has this stump speech now, I don't know if you've heard it. He'll say that the first time he was governor, that the prison percentage was only 3% of the budget. And now it's about 11%. The universities, the first time we ran for governor, was 10% of the budget, and now it's about 6 or 7% of the budget. So our priorities have gotten out of whack, just as in the Oakland City budget. Now 48% of the general fund goes to police, half of our budget, and it's just growing and growing and growing because our pension costs, but that's another issue. So why do I raise that? Because now you're threatened by losing your Prop 49 after-school funds too, because the prison machine in the state is just growing and growing and growing and eating up everybody's budget. They're eating everybody's lunch, just as the police department's budget is eating up all the other funds that we have for alternative services, for libraries, for after-school programs particularly, and for senior programs, and all of our other services are less now than 26% of the budget, because police and fire now make up 76% of our budget. So unless we get that under control, our after-school portion is also threatened. In recent weeks in the campaigns, and particularly in the attacks against me, people are saying, oh, Jean was not willing to cut non-essentials. And many people have come up and said, well, why do we have the 4% Measure D set aside? And I said, you know, young people make up at least 40% of our population. 4% of the city budget is not too much to guarantee for after-school programs. So that's the political context of what we're dealing with, that some people believe that the only way that you have a safe city is that you have to have more police, more police, more police. Well, let me tell you, my first after-school program, and then I'll end here and let you ask another question. Okay. My first major after-school initiative at the local level on the city council was getting the village center set up at Roosevelt. And the Oakland Police did a study at that time after we set up the Roosevelt Village Center, which was an attempt to make a 24, but a program into the evening and to bring more services for families. It was sort of the predecessor of Tony Smith's current idea of a complete school. The police did this study and said that crime in that neighborhood went down 40% the first year that we established the Roosevelt Village Center. So that's the tie. That there's lots of research, although some people want to forget it, that if you give people, young kids particularly, alternatives and you give them hope, that crime goes down. And so as a city council member, I have a dual responsibility. One, to make sure that the 40% of my constituents who don't vote, who are young people, get served and protected, and secondly, to make sure that I use my dollars well. And so I think after-school programs are a good investment, and I've been fighting to protect our Measure D funds.
Beautiful. What would your administration do to make an authentic partnership with the school district and really help them push forward this new agenda that they have?
A couple of things, I fought really hard to get back local control. And again, Sanjay Sanson, who's my campaign co-chair, led that fight. And when I helped get him elected, I said, Sanjay, that the schools can't improve with the state running them because they don't engage the parents. And you're never going to turn around the schools if you can't get the parents engaged and involved. And so that's pretty critical. Little did I know that the state takeover would leave the school district 3 times more in debt. So let me just start from the very beginning. If I become mayor, I plan to use my bully pulpit to go to Sacramento and say the state does not get to leave the school district in worse shape. I mean, they took it over allegedly because they were $20 million in debt, and now they're $100 million in debt. And it's not like they got great stellar ratings for their administration. They were their own independent ratings say that they had too many consultants, that they wasted a lot of money downtown, and that they were not that effective on many different issues. And so I believe that we need to get the state to either forgive part of the debt or at least forgive the interest. The interest alone on $100 million would give the teachers of Oakland about a 4 or 5% raise, and they are now the lowest paid teachers in Alameda County. That's just not acceptable. So that's one thing. Secondly, as I said earlier, I plan to actually around our Kids First plan and around youth, I'd like to pull us together for really the top leaders and including the nonprofits for real strategic discussion on what's an overall plan for kids in the city. And so we have our Kids First plan, we have our Measure Y plan, Tony now has that plan. How do they really all come together? How do they, so I'm willing as mayor to partner with Tony on that, to have some really intense discussions so that we can have the best usages of the funds, and and again, study it neighborhood by neighborhood. Here's the school district, here's the city, here's the nonprofits. Where is the most need? Where are the holes? How are we going to prioritize our funding to make a real difference? So whether that's something like the Promise and the Harlem Kids Zone intensity in some of the poorest neighborhoods with the parents with the least skills, age, or resources, or whether that's deciding where we should prioritize our preschool programs. I think that should be part of a city-wide discussion with everybody at the table for part of that. And that planning is pretty critical. Thirdly, I plan to recreate the Ed Cabinet that Elihu Harris had when he was mayor. And that was a monthly meeting where we had all of the educational institutions in one room. And I would add, based on the current economy, our job training programs, so that we basically talk about a continuity so that we don't lose a single kid. What I'm really worried about now is where Oakland is going to grow. All the long-range studies on the economy, when the recession ends, we're going to grow in jobs, we're going to grow in housing units. But what is not known is, will those jobs go to Oakland kids? Will the new housing units be something that people who live here can afford to live in? And so that next mayor is going to determine that. And so, that's why I say you don't want a mayor who's beholden either to big developers or the California Prison Guards Union. You need a mayor who's going to be able to stand up and do what's right for the city of Oakland. And in this case, I think we need to look at what we can do it as a continuum. Each of us has some education components. Even Parks and Rec, we sponsor a lot of educational programs. One of the things that we did when I was a school board member, when arts were being cut, I actually asked the city to come in and bring a lot of the music and art culture programs to the after-school programs while we were building up our music program, so kids wouldn't miss music. And so the after-school became like period F, right, where they could still get music. And now, ironically, we have to do it because the Bush administration graduation requirements. So many kids have to take remedial classes that even though we have funding for arts and music, they can't get it into their school day because of the requirements of the testing program. So getting back to after school and what I can do. I think the Ed Cabinet can look at where kids drop out, how do we make sure they get their GED, how particularly they get the new jobs. And I'm sorry, the main point I was going to make is that Oakland's going to have these new jobs. So how do we make sure they get them? And so there's two main things the next mayor will do. One is the mayor has to make sure that these compliance agreements that we have in some of the things funded by the Obama stimulus funds, like the airport connector, the Army base work, and new housing that's already planned and approved, that at least 25 to 50% of those jobs go to Oakland residents. The second thing the next mayor can do is, because my own workforce, we have about 5,000 employees in the city, a third of them are going to retire. Nobody knows the high school internship continuum better than I do. I'm the one who got that funding when I was a parent activist from the city. As a school board member, I defended it and helped build the career academies. As a city council member, I've protected the internship money. So I want to make sure that those 1,700 jobs, as many as them, will be grown here in the Oakland Public Schools. That I have interns that come and work for the city, that I hire them during the summer while they're at community college or Cal State Hayward, and that they come and work for the city of Oakland. So those are the kinds of things I think the next mayor can do.